Hey Marmite Man, I just watched your video Anarchy is Bullcrap, and I figured I'd make a response and reply to a couple of your objections. The first thing you say is you point out that anarchists at the G20 protests were rioting and they were, I think in the video you showed they were burning up a police car. I want to point out that that's not representative of the typical anarchists, regardless of whatever school they adhere to. It's a small minority of anarchists that are violent, and really one of the most popular arguments for anarchism, arguably the most popular argument for anarchism, is the fact that the state is necessarily backed up by violence. It's inherently violent. So that really makes violence inherently contradictory to the philosophy of anarchy. And really, the same argument could be applied to anything. There are Tea Partiers who are assholes. There are BNP supporters who are racist. That doesn't necessarily discredit the Tea Parties or the BNP. And to say that it does would be in ad hominem fallacy. Also, I want to point out that the only schools of anarchism that really support violent revolution very often are libertarian socialist schools. The majority still don't support violence, but violence coming from anarcho-capitalists, I've never heard of it, at least. There may have been some situation of politically motivated anarcho-capitalist violence, but I've never heard of it. Yeah, and it definitely the people at the G20 protests were not anarcho-capitalists. Just considering that their flags are red and black. Red and black represents either anarcho-syndicalism or anarcho-communism, while yellow and black represents anarcho-capitalism. So it's safe to assume that they were not anarcho-capitalists. Then you give, in my opinion, the best objection, the only really relevant one, and you object that if we were to abolish government, we'd have chaos. And there's a few key assumptions there that are false. Number one, you assume that if we were to abolish law, we'd have chaos. And I do agree more or less that things would be shitty without law. I don't support abolishing law. But I think it would be a little bit better than complete chaos. You might even be able to get a small economy functioning that way. The second assumption you make is that you assume that for law to exist, it must necessarily be backed up by violence. That's contradicted by historical examples, the best example being merchant law in the Middle Ages. Forget exactly when, but sometime before the Renaissance and after the Roman Empire. I really don't remember exactly when. But anyways, with this merchant law, if someone were to commit fraud, for example, then everyone else would boycott him. And that's a form of law that you could sort of get an economy functioning that way. And once again, it's not a system that alone I would necessarily support, but it is still better than having no law by a lot. Then your third assumption you make is that to have law backed up by violence, you need a state, which is false simply because you can have private defense agencies that people hire to defend them. That will basically create a system of de facto law. And if you want to read more about that, I'll put it in the description. I'll put a link to a PDF file of this book called For a New Liberty, and it covers a lot of the objections to anarchy. Next, you say most anarchists are very far left. Yeah, that's true, but there are lots of anarchists who aren't left-wing necessarily. I myself am a market anarchist. There are anarcho-primitivists who basically want to go back to how we were 6,000 years ago. Like, yeah, they want to destroy civilization, basically. There are egoist anarchists who I don't really understand that position too well. I'll have to read more about it, but I've heard of that school. There are mutualists, another system I don't really know very much about. I think that the first person who called himself an anarchist was in fact a mutualist. But anyways, yeah, most anarchists don't necessarily need to be left wing. Uh, you go on to say they support equality and diversity. Uh, Equality is a very vague word. What do you mean by equality? Equality of what? Equality of opportunity, equality of outcomes, equality under the law. What kind of equality are you talking about? Um, I support equality under the law. That's why I oppose a state, in fact. But I'm opposed to equality of outcomes. I don't want people to have equal wealth. I'm opposed to equality of opportunities, just not as strong as equality of outcomes. Um, I think both of those systems have poor economics and philosophy. As for diversity, I support diversity just so it's voluntary. As long as there's no forced segregation or integration, I'm fine with diversity. I don't really give a shit. Um, then you suggest that anarchists vote for people. You suggest that we vote for people who represent us. That would be a good suggestion, except for the fact that an anarchist politician is an oxymoron. You can't have one. Um, you say don't not vote because not voting is not going to do anything, which is false. There are many ways of reaching anarchism without voting. And in fact, in my opinion, voting is the least efficient method. Agorism is a great example of a method of reaching anarchism. My favorite is education, just educating people about it, because none of these strategies are going to work if no one knows what anarchy is and everyone recognizes the state is legitimate. Then you mentioned rioting again. I already covered that. I'm opposed to rioting. I'm opposed to violence. Then you go on to say that you've been studying anarchy for a long time. I really don't understand how you could have studied anarchy more than a quick glance at Wikipedia if you uh, have such a lack of understanding of it. You don't even seem to understand the left-wing anarchism that you're critiquing. And don't even get me started about anarcho-capitalism. You don't seem to even be familiar with the idea. Maybe you are, maybe I'm just making an assumption, but you didn't really mention it in your video. Alright, that pretty much does it for this video. Yeah, if you've got any questions, then feel free to ask them. If you want to reply, then go ahead and either post it in the comment section, or even better, post a video response. I'd love to go back and forth and have a debate on this. Thanks for watching. Bye.